Welcome to Puck Talk CS. The New York Rangers are Eastern Conference final bound for the fifth time since 2012 with the victory in Game 6 on away ice over the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm Chives, Matthew Mugno, alongside Steve Murno, Mike Mugno. Pleasure to join you guys after all the emotions last night. Steve-O, how you feeling after this one?
Oh my goodness. This was one of the greatest wins I've ever watched in my entire life as a fan out of all the teams. I mean, not only a series clincher on the road, the pressure of a choke looming. I'm sitting there, I'm starting to think, shit, we're going to 7. How did this happen? How did we get here? But I mean, wow. I wanted to drink the tears of that Canes kid crying after they
You're
lost on the
terrible.
broadcast.
Terrible.
He's got to get used to it, man. And listen, Canes, get lost, send them back to Hartford. Bye-bye. Let's talk some puck, boys. Let's go. Conference finals.
Conference finals. Mike,
Conference
now you were
finals,
sitting with
baby.
me. You drove up from the great state of Delaware to watch this game. So we lived the game together. Obviously legacy game from Chris Kreider. Like legacy is in like Rafters legacy type game. Igor Shesterkin was also just a monster, like a true Hemi performance from number 31. So it's like where to start. I think where to start. There's not much to really be said at this point about the first two periods. The Steve-O curse happened again. 1 minute on the clock. Martin H. scores the first goal with, I think it was 1:11 left. And that was one of those moments, and it just continued. Seth Jarvis scores the second goal for Carolina. Vincent Trocheck cuts the lead, by the way, monster against his former team. And Sebastian Aho obviously puts them up 3-1 going into the third to set up the phenomenal ending. So, I mean, not a great start. You're down 3-1. There was a lot of blame going everywhere. It seemed like not only online, but even talking to you guys, there was no good vibes going into that third period. And with that, it starts with, again, detailed plays. Martinuk finding Natchez on like an unreal backhand pass. No one's there. The Lindgren breakaway. Mike saw it. I was literally on my hands and knees.
There was, oh my God, the amount of cursing that came out of this kid last night. I know we're in a deep playoff run when my brother is literally, there's spit glistening in the glow of the television as he's like, what the fuck? Just, you were so angry at Mika Zibanejad on that second goal by Carolina. Just,
listen, I think, Trocheck gets things started. And we were talking about this morning while Mike and I watched the Ranger Encore, by the way. Vincent Trocheck, 6th goal of the playoffs. I think 14th point. He has 8 assists as well. Couldn't come at a better time. I mean, it cuts the lead when the Rangers had zero momentum. Like, this looked like probably worse than Game 5, I thought. There were moments the Trouba giveaway early. Like, we were lucky that it was 0-0. I didn't think we had chances, just like in Game 5. And it felt like did this team just roll over and die? That's what it started to really feel like. Now, I know it was later in the game too, but right before they tied it, the Gustafsson, I think it was Gustafsson and Schneider, bump into each other. And Aho has the breakaway. Like, just all those moments combined, I felt like, maybe this team is just going to roll over and this is it. Obviously until that third period, right?
Yeah, I thought we were going to have flashbacks to last year's Satan series. I thought it was going to be, they just, like you said, roll over, die. We never hear anything from these Rangers. I don't want to say again, but, it was just going to be a rough postseason. It was going to be like a rough summer. And thank God, Christopher James, CJ Kreider pulls through for us, man.
I mean, legacy game. And he's a guy that we always talked about. Something that first came to mind this morning was that there was a group of fans online that at the time, 2020, that crazy like Booch accident, John Davidson's addressing the media, and he says they signed Chris Kreider. And there were fans it was a split aisle. It really felt like a split aisle. I mean, at this point, it's undeniable. Like this team goes the distance. I think it's Raptors for 20.
I'm going to answer the question right now. You asked Steve Levy in our interview with him about Kreider and the Raptors. I'm answering that question right now that you posed. Guaranteed, he's going in the Raptors. I mean, that was one of the greatest legacy games ever. And I just want to know, because you go back, there was really nothing to talk about in those first two periods. I mean, you just mentioned the Vinny T goal. That was a gimme from Anderson. You know, I said it here, and we got another gimme from Anderson too. The Kreider goal, the second goal was horrible. I mean, I cooked up Anderson here on the pod. I know the last time we had you on, Mike, you know, I disagreed with you on Anderson, and Anderson was not sharp at all this series.
No.
And I would bet you $1,000 he will not be on this team. I don't know if you guys caught Rob at the post game. He cooked Anderson up. I mean, oh my goodness. He said, yeah, we gave them a few goals that we shouldn't have. And then I think he mentioned specifically the second one. But I mean, we really got lucky on some. We got 2 freebies from Anderson. And then I want to mention the Lindgren one. I mean, I was sitting there. I was on my hands and knees too. I'm like, please, sound the horn, sound the horn, sound the horn.
Yeah, you
Mike,
know what?
do you think?
That was one of those plays too where it was like an unlikely like of course the most Ranger thing ever is our defensive defenseman is in on a breakaway, puts on an unreal move, and then like it just doesn't cross like there's no white on the other side of it. But yeah, Mike, I mean, you know, we always talk about we've talked about Igor, we've talked about Frederick Anderson. You know, with Freddie's performance, he just didn't have it this series. Do you think he returns?
If I'm the Canes, you have Kochetkov in the wings. You know, Freddie is a UFA very soon, right? Is it at the end of this year? It's next year. It's next year.
Next year, yeah.
He's UFA next year. You bring him in. I say you'd start Kochetkov over him. You know, have Freddie as a backup. You don't start him next year's playoffs because I think we can all assume that the Canes are most likely going to make the playoffs out of, you know, the teams after the Metro's performance this year. The Canes are more than likely going to make the playoffs, even if they lose a lot of the guys off this team this postseason, or this offseason, I should say. But listen, Steve-O, I know literally 2 pods ago, the last one I was on, I was like, oh, that was terrible. Why did Toronto run him out of town? Yeah, this is why. This is why they ran him out of town. You know, Igor, I mean, when it just came down to it, Igor just outdueled him, is honestly selling Igor short. That was another incredible Hank-like performance, vintage Hank performance by Igor, and Freddie just could not match that.
Yeah,
the blocker save that he had,
save
that he had on Svechnikov at the end of the game was just, oh my God, heart attack city. That was vintage Hank. And yeah, listen, I know it's early in his career, but man, if Igor keeps this up year after year in the playoffs, we got yet another Hall of Fame goalie coming out of New York.
Not only that, I mean, first of all, we're balling on like a $5 million contract on him. I don't like to get into all that right now. Like, you know, it's the playoff run. That's the point of signing these guys to make it the distance. 36 shots against last night. Now, he surrendered 3 goals, but I mean, boy, I thought, you know, first goal, not on him. Second goal, certainly not on him. Third goal, I know it was questionable. I would argue it wasn't on him. I thought Miller pinched. There was no forecheck, and then VC was gassed and was the back checker. It was just like unfortunate circumstance. Right. I could see where, you know, you could split aisle on that too. But at the same time, I thought if it wasn't, you know, Chris Kreider legacy game, like Shesterkin also to me was right there.
Right.
Especially like you mentioned, Will Cooley, rookie mistake. He goes to go up ice, leaves Svechnikov wide open. Like he had all the time in the world. He could have done whatever he wanted to. If he could have picked it up and gone for a Michigan with all the time he had.
Right. But
that's a huge stop, right?
But that's the thing I said last pod. The goals that the Rangers are letting up in this series are mostly because the D are just leaving Igor out to dry. I mean, listen, the Rangers, I talked about this last pod, the Rangers tried to match Carolina's forecheck, but the difference is Carolina gets their D-men back every time. And the Rangers were just not getting back. They would put that pressure up high, and then they wouldn't get back to help Igor out. I mean, how many times last night did the Canes just slip right through the Rangers' D?
Mm-hmm.
Or there were just like one guy back, and all of a sudden there were 3 Canes heading up the ice.
Keandre Miller on the Aho goal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Listen, they
Mm-hmm.
cleaned it up. I'm so glad that they cleaned it up for the third period. I thought so. But, that was like 4 straight periods of hockey where the Rangers were just letting the Canes blow right by them and they weren't getting back on D. And listen, I know I'm biased. I know I'm a biased goalie guy. I know I'm a biased Igor guy. But, just looking at the way that people were talking online, you really can't blame Igor for anything but that third goal, honestly, in my opinion.
I defend what I say. And last night, Chives, I was texting you and I was harping on Igor a bit, and I'll stand by that a little bit. Igor he made the big saves when it mattered, but I still don't think he was fully on top of his game, in this game. Look at the first goal. Questionable. I know you said that wasn't on him. I mean, he tried to catch a puck out of the air that he missed, that he usually makes that catch. Now I don't think that goal was fully on him. I forget who it was. I think it was Lindgren gave the puck away. That ultimately led to that Nature's goal. So a little bit. That third goal, I'd like to give Igor better odds at making that save. But I mean, he misplayed a puck in our end in the third that almost led to a goal. There was that Gensel shot that went off his pad that he usually is very on top of, that almost went in behind him. So I didn't think he was fully on top of his game. Yeah, I agree. He made some big saves when it mattered. Really did. But he wasn't on top of his game, but it was still better than Anderson. And we still won. So I do give Igor credit for hanging in there. He made a lot of big saves when it was 3-1 in the third. But again, I didn't see him. This wasn't his best postseason game. We've seen him. I mean, you look at game 2 when he had the 54 saves. I mean, we've seen better games from him. But again, credit to him for keeping us in there.
He still made 33 saves, and I would argue he's the best goaltender in the playoffs. If it's not Bobrovsky, I would say Swayman. Actually, listened. Yeah, Swayman's up there too. But man, I mean, Igor, I think in terms of time, like the timely efforts he's made, and the situations he's been in, like Swayman has never really been in this situation where the Bruins are down 3-1, and the world is hanging in balance of a game 7. And neither is Bobrovsky. So I think in terms of the 3 goaltenders, not only out of the East, but the entire play, the teams that are remaining, I think Igor is arguably the best goaltender in the playoffs.
I would agree with that. I would agree. It's just painful when I see that Bob is up there and he has 2 Vezina Trophy wins and he might get a third. And he will just. Here's the difference. I think what I'm trying to say is the difference between someone like Bob and someone like Igor. Igor rarely, if ever, puts up an egg in the playoffs. I mean, what was it? Game 3, Game 4 in the Pittsburgh series in 22.
Mm-hmm.
Besides that, I mean, you can't say that Igor hasn't come and brought, at the very least, 90% of his game every playoff game. Bobrovsky will just lay down and die at the most random times. So I'd rather someone like Igor who consistently brings 85 to 90% rather than someone who Bobrovsky is 110 for 3 games and then just dies,
Now,
yeah, what happened, boys? We don't like Edmonton with Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. We don't like them.
No, no, absolutely not.
How about
Arthur
yeah, I know,
Shilovs?
100%.
Yeah,
I gotta say though, he is a dark horse. He's been playing. I've been pretty surprised with him. I mean,
94.
Igor, 100%. We'll agree. Best goaltender left in the playoffs. Best goaltender in the league. I mean, given the last month of play. But this guy, Shilov in Vancouver, I mean, he stepped up really big when they've asked him to. So that's something to monitor there.
What is it with the Western Conference and backup goalies the past 4 years worth of playoffs? Vegas has had a million of them. Colorado has been, it's Darcy Kemper, Alexander Georgiev, all former backups. even Winnipeg. Remember Laurent Brossoit went like with them on a little bit of a. It's like why
last year, right? Wasn't that last year?
Yeah. It's just like have consistent goaltending, please, just from like a starter, please.
Yeah, you're right. It's
That's
so
my OCD.
bipolar. Gorgiev,
Yeah.
like one day you'll see him like with giving a 1 goal, 35 saves, and the next night he lets in 6 off the Stars. So it's just so inconsistent.
I think we're getting off track here, boys. I'm sorry about that. But
Passion, baby.
Well, all right, let's reel it in with the man of the hour. Chris Kreider scores his 5th, 6th, and 7th playoff goals of the postseason. Roslovic, 2 assists on those plays. Artemi Panarin shot from the point on the power play. Let's talk about that real quick. Biz Boucher saying on the broadcast that Zibanejad, the cross-check from Stahl was a sell job. I think that was ridiculous. I mean, cross-check straight to the numbers. He gets flattened against the boards, and they called it soft. Kreider capitalizes on it. I don't think it was not only do I not think it was soft, there were barely any penalties really called all game. So the fact that this was even a conversation was a little bit ridiculous. Listen, to me, you take a penalty if it's softer, if it's not. The Rangers have been on the opposite end of a lot of those as well. It's got to go both ways. You can't say it for one team and not the other.
Listen, that was the last thing I wanted to do during the second intermission, is sit there and watch Biz and these guys on the intermission, aside from Keith Yandel. But I'm not listening to anything these guys say. Like, get the hell out of here.
Yandel's a real one. Yans is a real one.
For real. But how about Chris Kreider? I mean, one of two things has happened with him. He either was listening to the last Puck Talk episode where we said, get shots on this guy Anderson, or it's that he knows goaltending. And he knew that Anderson was not on his game. And I mean, that second one right there, you could tell that the tide was turning there. We came out finally for the first time in like the last 5 periods with the sense of urgency. And you mentioned Jack Roslovic. I thought he had a very underrated game. He had a fantastic game. He was driving the puck. I mean, that Rangers first line with Mika, Roslovic, and Kreider was our best line this game. I mean, even before, even in a 3-1 game in the third, they were the only line that was really getting chances on net here. And the puck movement, too, between Roslovic, Mika, and Kreider, I thought this game, they were fantastic.
Yeah, Megan Shaika, she's huge in like this analytics world. Am I a huge fan of like when it's deep stats? No. But to supplement what you said, they had 75% of our chances 5-on-5 last night. So that line who we saw come through in game 1 and then kind of disappear, they really came through last night. I agree. And outside, I thought Panarin making the heads-up play on the first goal for the Rangers, like the puck just kind of came out to him. He was like skating backwards and then just took the shot. And Trocheck clearly planted himself in front. Great play. I thought that line was also generating. That's kind of what we expect. They're our best line. But for Kreider, Mika, and Roslovic, I said it, Steve-O, Zibanejad, like that line if we're going to win, we need those 2 lines at full force. And I agree. I thought Roslovic looked great in support of those 2 last night. I mean, Mike, in terms of not only Mika, Roslovic, Kreider coming through, that game, what stands as the game winner. I mean, have you seen a goal like that in your lifetime?
I mean, I have. I mean, not to like that extent of like Rangers hat trick in the third period to close out a series. No, I have not. But no. Listen, Chris Kreider. Here's what I want to say: when you have a series in a game, like we got to beat these guys. We have to turn it on. Where do you go? You put your best players in the best positions that they know that they can win the game for you. And after watching the encore, I guess I didn't pick it up when I watched it last night. They were trying so hard to feed Chris Kreider in front of the net. I mean, of course, it was Lindy's assist on that goal. Lindy, was skated around the net and passed up front. Roslovic tried to feed him twice. Zibanejad also tried to feed him in front. That entire third period, I felt like they just kept trying to feed Chris Kreider right in front of the net. And you look at some of the greatest guys of all time. Alexander Ovechkin, when the game is on the line, the Caps need a win. What do? They feed him right at that point and just absolutely rips from his office. You look back at the Oilers back in the 80s. The only times that they ever really turned it on and clutched up, some of the greatest passes from Wayne Gretzky were right in Gretzky's office. That is Chris Kreider's office right in front of the net. And the best way you're going to win is when you have Chris Kreider in front of the net and you're just feeding him pucks to tip in. And I mean, listen, I don't know if that was the boys decided to do that. I don't know if Lavi said that in the locker room, but either way, you got to stick to what you know. You got to stick to the best. And that's exactly why Chris Kreider is honestly, listen, I don't know. I know I've only been watching hockey since the early 2010s, but even still, he's got to be one of the greatest of all time in front of the net. Absolutely no doubt. Probably the best.
Don't discredit yourself on that. I mean, we've seen enough of what he's done to, I think, establish he's definitely the best tip-in player. I think he surpassed statistically Joe Pavelski in tip-ins at this point, and he's a player that's, significantly older than him. I think Pavelski's 39, Kreider's like 33. So I agree in terms of net front. And I also give credit. I didn't think Zibanejad had a fine game by any means, but Zibanejad made the move past Burns to get the shot on Anderson. Kreider went to the net, and again, all that plays on Kreider. The goal that oh my gosh, we're in it goal. That's what it felt like with the tap in. But Zibanejad got that on net, so you also have to give him a little bit of credit. I didn't think he had the best game, but in terms of net front, like you said, Mike, they were trying to feed him, and you said it best. You want your best players to be in the best positions. That's what we didn't see against the Devils last year. You did not see that. You saw Kreider. He had 6 goals in that series, and he was a monster on the power play. But other than that, you didn't have your other role players recognizing that, and you didn't have the other guys stepping up. I thought, obviously Lindgren to have redemption too on that assist was awesome.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And you know what? A guy like Panarin, okay, he had kind of a mid-game, toward the end of the game, especially in the third period. Honestly, you can probably just forget about the first 2 periods of this game as a Ranger fan. But, he was really the only player at that point that was breaking into the zone. He was really the only player that was breaking past their D-men when the Canes were pushing up high. And listen, he had the assist on that tying goal on the power play. Mm-hmm. He took the shot from the point. So, yes, was he in the best position that he normally is in, which is just walking around other teams? He tried. He kind of didn't really do that great this game with that. But when you have what makes this Ranger team so great is that you have a guy like Kreider that you can put him in that best position. Maybe next game we'll have Zibanejad up at the top of that circle ripping shots like Ovi. That's his best position. I think we have that dynamic. It's just a dynamic team. And so I think as a Ranger fan, you just need one of those guys to be in the best position in a game like that. We're in a good spot, boys. We're in a good spot.
Well, I also thought Panarin 2 assists on 2 crucial goals. The one to cut the lead. We did not score a power play goal for 2 games. We were 0-8 going into that power play. So the fact that he got that on net, our biggest conversation with Panarin all offseason was that he doesn't shoot. I thought he shot the puck. I also thought there was a moment when the game was tied. He walked through the entire Hurricanes defense and got a shot on goal. It wasn't the best shot, but I do think he stood out. He also had 2 goals, 6 assists in 6 games this series. So he had 8 points in the series. So I know he didn't have the game Kreider had, but I also think he was still, a major factor in that. So I think obviously power play goal big. Steve-O, I want to know your thoughts on the fact, Kreider has a natural hat trick. Only other third period hat trick besides Gretzky and Messier in Ranger history that a player scored. So I want to hear your thoughts. You haven't chimed in.
I'm still processing what happened. I was just so bonkers that I didn't even realize that Kreider had a hat trick in the moment, when he scored. And then it hit me 2 minutes later, oh wait, that's Kreider's hat trick. That's how electric that moment was. I do want to jump back to Panarin though for a second. It was an okay game for Panarin. I was after the second period. I was very frustrated with him. Those cross the ice passes don't work in the playoffs, and I thought Carolina was eating us up with those. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't Panarin, and we had a lot of guys doing that. I thought we made a lot of defensive mistakes. I thought it was huge for Lindgren to have the third period that he had, because I thought he was horrible in the first two periods. I mean, he was hitting the ice. What was up with the ice, by the way? I mean, we had guys falling left and right. I mean, Anderson was slipping around. Pucks were going off of sticks. Did you guys catch that?
It's what happens when you have hockey in the South, man. It's just too hot.
No, I do, Steve-O. That's actually a good point, because I think there were a few plays that stem from that. Like Trouba kind of just went down. And I know that,
Gustafson
it's like,
too
okay,
went down.
it happens. Yeah, I mean, there were a few times where, even like you said, like I thought Lindgren like couldn't settle the puck and then like threw it up the boards, and that's what resulted in the first goal. That was a good catch, because I thought they mentioned it like once or twice on the broadcast, but that's what was also a factor in the LA series in 14. Like the ice was just not very good, and it's what happens when you're in these hot environments.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the Jordan Staal penalty in the third. I mean, if you're a Canes fan, you can't be sitting there mad at that, because a minute ago, before that, Brady Shea throws the puck the hell out of here, and I mean, we get no call on that. So I thought they showed Gary Bettman's there. I thought that was the ultimate. Here we go, screw the Rangers button. I'm lucky. Listen, we got the karma, and we were able to put it in. And once you knew 3-3, that was the ultimate tie there. And I'm so happy that next year they're changing this rule where you could challenge a play like that, because I'm all for getting this call right. And I mean, if we didn't get the power play there, this game could have been a completely different game. So I'm all for getting the calls right. I thought a play like that should be reviewable, and I'm happy that they're changing it for next season.
No, I agree, Steve. That's a really good point. Everyone mentioned on the panel, like the TNT panel, the Staal penalty. But in reality, even if you call that soft, they got the Hurricanes like 3 minutes before that got away with clearing the puck over the glass. We've seen how many times in the last few years alone that kills a team, because it's not a penalty that you want, not only want to take, but it's not even like it was a cross check. He was kind of going for the check. Shit. All right, we got to kill the penalty off. That's like a big, you just put the puck over the glass and now we're on the kill in a tie game. Or what was it, 3-2 at that point?
3-2.
I thought, for anyone, again, that said anything about the Staal penalty, there's no ground on that when Brady Shea 3 minutes before that took the worst penalty you could take outside of too many men.
Yeah, and you got Shea walking around smirking like he knew he got away with that. And I don't know how you missed that call, like in like at a game 6 in the third period, crucial as ever. But listen, can't complain about it because the outcome is different. Chris Kreider said, "Don't worry about it." But I mean, that's a call. You gotta, as we move on here, you gotta get
By
that
the way,
right.
real quick, I'd also like to mention, speaking of Shea, because I was thinking to myself, thank God we didn't have another former Ranger burn us in the playoffs. And then I thought, they had Tony DeAngelo. Could you imagine how bad that would have been? I mean, listen, he was a non-factor in the series. He had maybe a couple good shots that were like, but I don't know if that was like they were good shots or it was terrifying because it was Tony DeAngelo. We didn't want him to score. But I just love, like, he drops the gloves, is like, "I'll fight any of you," and the Rangers just laugh at him like, "What the fuck, dude? Like, get out of here."
I thought a lot of his. That's a good point, Mike. That's a good point. I thought a lot of we saw a lot during the series, especially when we played at MSG, where DeAngelo tried to get involved, but they were just clear shots at desperation. I mean, he was shooting pucks all the way out from the blue line. I mean, they weren't getting through. So, and I think there were moments, and Charles, we talked about this, where he wanted to drop the gloves with Rempe, and I'm surprised that we weren't a little bit more physical. I think to throw a critique in there for this team, I don't want to say we were soft, but I do think we need to be a little bit more physical. We need to see a little bit more grit that we saw in that Washington series in the Eastern Conference Final, because again, even when Rempe was out there, we didn't really see a lot of fight. There wasn't really a lot of wasn't really chippy a lot during this series. Even like Keandre Miller, like a lot of guys were a little bit more reserved. I don't know if Laviolette, was telling the boys, we don't want to be taking penalties here or hold it back. We're up 3-0. But I think we do got to channel that a little bit more in the Eastern Conference Finals, no matter who we're playing.
Now, actually, where I agree and disagree. I agree because I thought in games 1 and 2 they were right. The Trocheck thumbs up to the box, all that crap. But I love it. But I also think game 5, you're trying to climb back into the game. Game 6, you're down 3-1. I think if you try anything, you don't want to be in the situation where now it's 4-on-4 and they score like a 2-on-1. Now, granted, we were giving up those 2-on-1s anyway, but you don't want to be in the position to be penalized on something. We saw they missed the puck over the glass. You didn't want to be in a position where it's like, all right, that wasn't really a penalty. Now we got to kill it off, and we're down 3-1. So I think in this game particularly, I agree. But if they don't show that fight, I don't want to talk about next series yet, but if they got to show that, I agree. Like we've seen it from them. Panarin has been physical. We've seen it from everyone. They weren't down the stretch in this series. Now I did want to mention on the goals, the recognition from some of the players. Trocheck finds Panarin cutting against the grain, and Panarin shot the puck through 2 defensemen. Kreider, world-class tip. The other thing I want to mention, you mentioned Lindgren didn't have a great first and second period, and I agree. But I do think he did outshine Adam Fox in this game. In terms of he was making plays that maybe resulted in goals, but there was effort. And I also thought, because I want to talk more about Adam Fox in a moment, but Lindgren to recognize that Martinook goes into the slot. So all of the Hurricanes forwards are now below the circles. Ryan Lindgren, Rosovic's coming up the boards, and he dishes the puck backhand soft because Lindgren recognizes, okay, Fox is back. There's only one forward in the slot. So Fox is all the way up at the point. We'll have a guy back. He hops into the play to make the pass circle around the net and find Kreider. I think that was a really smart play. And the reason I want to point that out is because, one, he went from making a bad play on the first goal to coming up big on the assist. Kreider net front, too. I mean, beast. But Adam Fox has been silent. I think he's still injured. I think this is going to be a good rest time for him.
Listen, Big Al called it. Big Al called it in the Cap series.
He looks slow. Like Mike, I don't know if you could agree with me, but I think he made a lot of defensive plays on the defensive end. Like he was able to get a stick in there and break some plays to avoid like a 3-on-2 rush or a 2-on-1 rush last night. He made a couple big plays defensively. But I do agree with you, Chives, and this goes for the playoffs as a whole. Adam Fox offensively, I'm struggling to find him offensively. Usually we see Adam Fox be, a catalyst to this offense, and I haven't really seen him, out there on the offensive end. Defensively, I will agree. I've seen Fox defensively. But even last night, if you go back and watch the highlights, there was one clip in particular that I saw, and I'm like, Adam Fox looks like, you slow down the video and it's in slow motion. I mean, he looks so slow out there. I don't know if it's injury. Maybe he's tired. I don't know. It's so hard. Mike, what do you think?
I mean, you're right. I actually don't think I thought about it like that until you just said it. Thinking about it now, Fox's thing, what makes a good offensive defenseman is the ones that can move their feet, especially at their point. They can move back and forth across the blue line. The first real defenseman to be able to do that it was like the Ray Bork, Brian Leach kind of, like that era of defensemen in the 90s that kind of came up with that. And like Fox, I think, is one of those defensemen that can really move back and forth right at the top of the zone. He just isn't doing that. And honestly, I don't think it's because he's tired. I do think it's because he's injured, because you're not going to be very mobile if you still have a lingering knee injury, and you have to be mobile in order to contribute on those plays. So I don't know. Like you said, Chaves, I think the rest is going to be really good for him. I mean, I thought that the 10 days of rest was going to be enough after the Cap series, but honestly, just ice it up, lay on the couch. Hopefully did he get married or does he have a fiance?
Yeah, he has a significant other.
He has a significant other. You know what? Ask her to make you a lot of soup. Buy her nice jewelry in return, and really, I think just like rest up. Just really rest
Well,
it up and take
think
it
about
easy.
this too. Foxy is third on the team in minutes last night, 22 minutes. So I think he is laboring to some degree. And listen, he had the injury. I asked him, this was, still THN era chives. I asked him, have you ever been injured for long term before? He's never had a long term injury ever, his entire hockey career. So that's difficult. Like, he's 26 years old. He's the top paid defenseman on the team. He's won the Norris Trophy. He's a top NHL defenseman, in my opinion, top 3, top 2, arguably not 2. 4 assists in 10 games is just shades of what we saw in 22. We had 5 goals and 18 assists. And in Carolina, last time we won on the road there, a goal in game 7. So I do think on the offense, I agree, Steve. He did make some defensive plays, but I do think the Rangers, if, the further they go, it's not going to get any easier. Like, I think the first round was the sweep, but Carolina, the teams are playing ahead of you. You're going to need your dogs at full force. And I think there's no better time for Fox to have some rest than right now, because, boy, he's the second defenseman in NHL history to 35 points as a defenseman in 40 games. Like, they need him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got to
Yeah,
pull up.
no doubt. They're going to need him. Can I mention somebody else that I think that's been very quiet this series? And I'm a little disappointed in him, and I think this is not a question for now. This is a question for later on. But Kako Capo has been very quiet. And, maybe I was just caught in the heat of the moment last night at the end of the second intermission. But I was thinking, I'm like, there's a reason why we haven't re-signed this guy long term. This guy just, we can't. I don't know if he's just not comfortable, if he needs Hedel in there. We saw Hedel in there in game 3. Kako looking like he could wake up a little bit, but he's just been very quiet. What's your guys' thought on that?
Mike, I don't know if you want to chime in. I understand what you're saying. There's a lot that goes into that conversation. The checking line, how he's done before, last season versus this season. Like, there's a whole lot. To me, to answer directly, I think it doesn't help that, like, Wenberg and Cooley have had so many near goal opportunities that haven't gone in. Like, he's an assist guy to me at the NHL level. I don't think Kako is the 50 goal scorer, right? We all thought he could be coming out of the juniors. That's fine. That's fine. But with that, he's made some nice dishes that just some player, like Wenberg, hit the post in, what was that, game 5 or game 4? I just also think, I agree though, because the conversation becomes like, all right, but he could also be scoring. Mike, what do you think?
He's contributing. He's my dog, mostly because he's a meme to me, but he's contributing
good guy.
everything but great guy. He's contributing everything but scoring. And look, that line of him, Wenberg, and Cooley are fantastic. I thought they pulled up great. in the first couple games of this series. But I also think that part of the reason why the Rangers struggled the past couple games is because they didn't really contribute a whole lot. Will Cooley had a few chances. I thought Wenberg had a few chances here and there. But overall, I mean, I think that line kind of went silent the past few games, and it's just not helping. Like you said, Chives, I think Kako is an assist man. I think he's an excellent wingman when he's got the right line. It's just unfortunate because he's a second overall pick. You would really hope that he would be the centerpiece of a line. Hopefully the centerpiece of a second line. And, again, he's still young. I know he's, a year older than Lafreniere, and Lafreniere is actually putting up numbers. You got to be patient. Like, remember, Joe Thornton didn't break out of like a 40-point season until he was 25 years old. You don't know with development, but it's just disappointing. Like you said, Steve-O, it's just disappointing when, he's been on the verge. He's been on the verge of finally breaking out in the playoffs, and he just instead took a step back.
Well, I'd argue this too, though. Game 5, nobody looked good. And I know you're like, yes, that doesn't necessarily mean Kako not looking good is a good thing. But, this game as well, you're down 3-1. I don't think would it be great? And have we seen it from this club before when a depth guy has a big moment? Yeah. I don't think this was the game that a Kako was going to tie the game up. Like, I just think it was really coming down to the big guys like Kreider. Obviously, I think it was kind of a one-man show in that respect. And Barclay Goodrow scored the empty netter. But other than that, I didn't feel like those two lines to me were going to generate offense. Like, I think they were out there to weather the storm. You're in Carolina in game 6, and you could blow a 3-0 lead. Like, I just don't think in that situation, like a Wenberg's going to score on a Kako chance. But again, that doesn't necessarily defend him. And I know that's definitely something we'll talk about in the offseason. But I do agree in the sense, Steve-O, that, you definitely want to see some of those guys start putting the puck in the net because their zone time's awesome. But, like, you want to see goals come from that and not be in those situations that you got to count on, CK20 for the big goals all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think with Kako, you go back 2 years ago in the playoffs, he had big goals. He was more involved. And then you look at this year, he had 39 games played, and he only had 9 points in those. And he only has 2 points in these playoffs. I mean, 2 years ago, I think he had like 10 points, 10 plus points in those playoffs. We've seen he can be explosive, just quiet, all in all. And I do agree with you, Chavs. I know you brought it up before I thought our fourth line had a really quiet game. Not even a quiet game. They really struggled. And our third line is too. Third line. I can't think of one opportunity that the third line or the fourth line had in game 6 where I was like, they really struggled. So that's you move on. Now, I do want to move on. Let's talk about the Carolina Hurricanes for a second. I think you do got to give credit to Rob. I think he's a fantastic coach. The Devils fans over there were praying for him. I'm telling you right now, he's not going anywhere. I mean, the adjustments he made in this series alone, from game 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, just to keep his team in there. I mean, that alone, you got to tip your cap to. The Canes are a great team. But it really raises the question, our final thoughts here on them. They got a lot of free agents coming up. We could sit here, Chives, in a second. You could delve deeper into who they got going on because they have a lot and what to their situation is going on. But what's going to get this team over the hunch? You went out there, you got Orlov, you got Gensel, and it's still the same result for them. So if you're a Canes fan or just like in our situation, looking at them, where do you go from here? I mean, this is the second time in 3 years that we knocked this team off. And you get Gensel, you get Orlov, you think it's going to be different. Where do they go from here? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I think I talked about it last, when we previewed the series, like he runs the ship like QU. And I know that's like, okay, Matt, shut up about Quinnipiac. But it's true. I think it's like a system-based team. They don't really have Svech and Aho they're like A-, B+ star type players, but they don't, it's a team effort and collective. And we're seeing that's why this whole free agency thing is such a big deal. I think Bradley Nadeau, Jackson Blake, whenever James Murray comes back on, he can talk about them. I think they have players in the wings. Mike brought up Kochekov before in goal. They've struggled with goaltending in crucial elimination games. They have a lot of guys going out the door. I think it's going to be a team that if they're going to succeed moving forward, like you said, Brindamore, he's got to stay pat because I think it's really a system that makes this team successful. Jordan Martinook should not be this valuable of a player. I mean, he works hard. He's a hardworking guy, but what was his earnings before this year? You got those anywhere? You guys have him? No?
Let me see.
But, he's a guy that, like, they value so much there in the same respect that we put that kind of investment in Barclay Goodrow. But on most other teams, he probably wouldn't be. And that's a good culture. A good culture will bring that. Now, Steve, you mentioned, like, the players that could be out of there. Between this year and next year, it's a ton. Max Comtois, Jack Drury, Seth Jarvis, Martin H's, Jake Gensel, Jordan Martinook, Stefan Nason, Thibaut Teravainen. And that's just the forwards. Then on defense, Jalen Chatfield, Tony DeAngelo, Brett Pesce, Brady Shea. That's this summer. Next summer, Orlov, Slavin, Burns, and Sealy. I don't know who that is. And then Kuznetsov, Jesper Fast, Brendan Lemieux. So really their entire team outside of really some of their core pieces are up. Not a good side. Freddie Anderson as well. So I think they're going to shift to Kochetkov. And, it's funny because we were saying this before we hopped on. This core has been successful for 6 seasons. That's a long time to be considered like a cup contender. I think it's crazy that in one foul swoop, the Rangers surprised last night with, off the heels of Chris Kreider, and it pretty much ends this era of Carolina Hurricanes hockey. Like since 2019, they've been in the conference final conversation, but never won a game in the conference final. And now, it looks like they're pretty much exiting, and they're going to have to reboot.
Yeah, and you talked about. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Steve-O.
Real quick, I do want to defend Rob for not going to Kochetkov in this game. A lot of Canes fans are being like, "Why don't we just play Kochetkov?" It's not as simple as that, because you look to Game 3, you put him in, you didn't get the same. You got the same outcome, And Anderson had. I don't want to put praise to him because I thought we were just that bad in Game 5. But Anderson had a decent game in Game 5, So you thought maybe you got to bring that confidence into Game 6. And if you can't roll the dice and go to Kochetkov and you get the same result as Game 3, So you had to go with Anderson there if you were Rob. I just wanted to defend him on that point. Go ahead, Mike.
What was I going to say? Oh, we were talking about guys who were up in this core. But even Shabs, you're talking about it's really only their core pieces who are locked up. The only people who are locked up are where'd Steve-O go? I guess I'll continue. We'll wait for him to get back. But really the only guys who are locked up are Aho, Svechnikov, and Kotkaniemi long term.
Yeah.
And
he did not have a good series. He did not have a good series.
No. And Kotkaniemi long term was solely because they tried to, the whole give the finger to Montreal. That was a bizarre thing going on back a couple of years ago. So when you talk about, besides their big pieces, Aho, okay. He's not a game breaker. Like we said, he's not in the elite. So when you're losing, most of the team, if you really only bring it back Aho, it's like, okay, yeah, that's a core piece, but I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is they don't really have any guys long-term. And even if they are able to keep a handful of the guys that are free agents this summer, and lock them up kind of longer term to be kind of core pieces, none of them really inspire as much confidence as some of the guys like the Rangers, like Trocheck. Absolutely. You got to keep him. He's a dog. You know what I mean? Like Loft, Miller. You want to sign those guys. Schneider. There's no one really on the Canes that makes me say, you got to lock that guy up because he's a dog. You know what I mean?
I think there's guys like that, but one, it's costly. Two, they're aged. And it's like, Nason, Martinu. I think they'll bring Gensel back, for the record. But, I think where it gets tough is the depth. And they kept a lot of these guys for long term. The only major piece to me that left was Dougie Hamilton. For 6 years, it's felt like this same group has been together. Really, mostly the same group. And, the cost of that is now they're up, unfortunately for them, at the same exact time. And it's kind of wild to think, last year they got swept in the conference final. The year before that, we beat them in Game 7 on home ice. And this year, we shocked them on home ice in a Game 6 victory. And that's pretty much it. You only have so many shots with the same guys. And like you mentioned, I hear you. Is there any guys that you look at and it's like, we have to keep him? I don't know if it's about that as much as, Seth Jarvis, Young. They're very ranging. Martin H's, he's a question mark to me. Gensel is not, but you're going to pay him $9 million easily. And then I think Teravainen, he probably goes. Steve-O, you mentioned it. He was very quiet. Martinuk and Nason, I think it's tough because your depth pieces are probably the guys that go. Jesper Fast next season, the guys that'll win you a series. And we talked about it with our guys, for a number of games. We've been impressed by, Cooley, VC, Goodrow. those are the guys that are going to help them win a series. And right now, literally the guys returning, there's like 5 forwards. So,
and you know what? Just like you're saying, like Gensel at $9 million, you look at Toronto and you look how if you have a core that you're paying through the nose for at the cost of depth, it doesn't work. And especially when that core, yes, okay, in the regular season, Mitch Marner, absolutely lights it up. He's not a 16-game player, Really, out of that core, the core four minus Morgan Rielly in Toronto or plus Morgan Rielly, like they don't inspire the confidence that they really should in the playoffs. And yes, will they get you a couple rounds down, the boys down to Carolina? Yes, they will. But they just haven't inspired cup winning contention. And I don't know. That's the question of maybe Gensel, yes. But even he was kind of quiet last night.
Yeah, and now you also mentioned 16-game player. I think Chris Kreider, he's just going to keep coming up, legacy game. But
100%.
7 goals in the playoffs in 2 rounds. One we swept 4 games the first round. I don't think he gets enough credit as a 16-game player by any means.
No.
I don't think he's talked about in the same respect that like a Logan Couture, even a Nate McKinnon in the last few years has been, and he really is.
Yep, and we were just talking about this right before the pod chives. Kreider has just gotten better every single year that he's been a Ranger. It's incredible to see. And we were saying there were a lot of Ranger fans that were not very happy. I'm stealing this take from you, Chucks. Not very happy about about signing him when he at his age and for that length of a contract. And honestly, at this point, even if Chris Kreider is kind of mid the last year or two on his contract, I do not care because the last couple of years as in like that we've seen of Chris Kreider, he's only gotten better. So if the core of that contract was him at his best and better than he was before the contract, okay. So if his last year he's not that great when he's like 37, 38 years old, why are we looking that far in the future? It's all about now. It's all about now, boys.
It is all about right now. They're conference final bound. Kreider has 23 goals in his last 37 playoff games over the last 3 seasons. So, 23 goals. That's like a separate season for a player. Steve, I know you didn't even chime in on the what you proposed, talking about Carolina and their future. What do you think about all this stuff? Because I know you mentioned TiVo, and I thought that was a great point. Like, he was kind of a non-factor this year completely. I barely remember that he was on the team.
Yeah, you're right. Gensel, I'm surprised. You don't think you think they're going to re-sign Gensel? Because I don't think they're going to re-sign Gensel.
Well, I guess it depends on what approach they take, right? That's a good point, Steve. Like, are they going to go top heavy or are they going to go for their depth? Because they could sign Jarvis, Natchez, Martinuk, and Nason, or they could sign Gensel and pretty much let most of those guys go.
Yeah, I don't. Listen, this is hypothetical. I think they're going to go more the route towards Jarvis and Natchez. I think those are 2 guys that I think you have to re-sign at all costs. I think these are 2 young guys that are really going to make a difference. Jarvis, 22 years old. Natchez, 24, 25 years old. These are 2 guys that I think really do have potential to move you forward. And there's a lot of question marks, Brent Burns, I really don't think Brent Burns, I don't want to call him washed, but I don't think he had a great postseason at all. I don't think he's had a great year at all. I think you can tell that he's worn down a little bit for sure. So there's a lot of, I think this team is going to look a lot different as we transition into next year, and you mentioned there was a good point. There's a lot of guys on this team that are making pretty much bank, as some people would say, and they got to live up to their part of the end. So listen, it's going to be very interesting to see what Carolina does for sure.
I also thought Aho had a better series against us than in 22, but I thought Svech was fairly quiet as well. Like, they really tried to hype him up in game 4 or game 3. He had that monster shift. Listen, I thought he played great in that one game, but in the 22, he also had that breakaway where He scored on us in the breakaway on game 5. They went up 3-2 in the series. Other than that goal, he didn't score in that series. I felt like he didn't really have the impact I thought he would again. I'm not sold on him.
And he took a lot of stupid penalties, too.
A lot of dumb penalties. Actually, the whole team, the whole Carolina team did it. Actually, now that we're talking about that, I want to know your guys' retrospect on the series. I thought it was very strange. Like, game 1, we came out of the gate hot. Game 2 was a crazy double overtime game. Like, that was like a Stanley Cup game. Game 3, the Rangers put out the fire after a late game tire with another OT goal, a quick one. We're not used to that. We go up 3-0. Lose game 4 in a failed comeback. Game 5, Jacob Trouba scores like an unreal goal, but we get smoked. And then game 6 was like, holy shit, is this going to game 7? And then we have a legacy game out of Kreider. Really a roller coaster. Like, I thought this was up there with the 2014 Montreal series. I want to know your guys' retrospect because, Mike, you brought up the penalties. I forgot that was even, something that was going on too. Carolina took a lot of careless penalties. Real quick,
I know you said it was a lot like the Montreal series with like the whole Carey Price incident with Dustin Tokarski. And then game 4 was the OT winner. Game 6, he had like Dami Moore scores the only goal to send us to the cup, right? But that's fun because it's the Montreal Canadiens. Les Clubs de Hockey Canadiens. This is the Carolina Hurricanes. Like, to me, they're kind of like this era's Washington Capitals. We're like, yes, right now we keep running into them in the playoffs. Some of the games are really gritty and tough. But, like, when the Capitals started to fall off, when the Canes start to fall off, like, I'll look back fondly on these series, but, like, it just doesn't have the I don't know. It just doesn't have the same as like if we were playing like a really storied club that we have a long history with, So I think that's why it felt a little more strange than it did like, oh, that's an instant classic. You know what I mean?
Oh, I hear you. No, I like that. I like that perspective, Mike. Steve-O, what do you think in retrospect of the entire series?
I think the course of the series was pretty much the way it played out. All these games are really close. All of these games, minus game 5, was decided by 1 goal. And very easily, you looked at 3-0, Rangers are up 3-0. That was very deceiving because Carolina was in all of these games, and they very much could have easily stolen a game here in game 2 or a game here in game 3. And it was very close, and it came down to the wire. And it was very tight contested, and I think that this really showed us this New York Rangers team, they proved why they were best in the NHL this year. I mean, they've done it all year long. They led the league in comeback wins. When push came to shove, this was true adversity. You did it all season long. How are you going to do it in this series? And we came out and we did it. So that's why, again, my confidence, it wasn't shot, but it is ticked a little bit down, but is fully restored now. This team, best in the league all season long. I got nothing else to say, boys. I mean, all smiles here.
Yeah, this club, they're the only team in the last 10 years, so decade 2014, that's made it to the cup. Oh, good Lord. Made it to the conference final, winning the President's Trophy. And they did that twice, 2015, this season, 24. So, again, Steve, we talked about how the President's Trophy, no one's talking about that the Rangers still have home ice in the playoffs. And they won the President's Trophy, and they've made it now to the conference final. 5th time. Now, Mike made a good point. It's I think the Lightning lead now, 5+ conference finals since 2012. The Lightning lead that with 6. So we're up there in that conversation now as I think a club that's had maybe not domination, but has been in that conversation for very long with success. At least making it to the conference final to me is a successful season. We want the cup, obviously. But with that, I had another fleeting thought about just wrapping up this series, but I guess it'll come to me at another time.
Yeah, someone's got to do a little meta-analysis and see how many times each club has been in the semifinals. Because everyone always talks about how many times they've made it to the finals, but I feel like semifinals, that's a deep playoff run. I want to know what clubs have done that the most over like the length of the Stanley Cup or the NHL, I should say. I don't know. You know me, Mr. Historian. I think that would be interesting to see. But the Rangers have to be up there. I mean, in the 70s, the 80s, a couple times in the 90s, now in the 2010s, now in the 2020s. We've seen a couple deep semifinal runs. We got to be up there,
Well,
But,
also this I was going to mention this was like a close call, but we've never really seen, our generation's never seen the Rangers in the driver's seat of a series like that. And they went up 3-0. That was a weird feeling, but I felt like losing a series lead felt very different than climbing back into it. I really think that from our standpoint, watching at home, I felt like it was very different. And now that it's over, I just felt like it was more of relief that we didn't blow it. But I also had confidence in the team that, like, all right, I have some faith here because we saw it all year. This team won the President's Trophy. The MetLife comeback, I feel like that set the precedent for this team. Like, they are never out of it. And I know it's been no quit for a long time now, probably like 4 years they've been using that slogan, but I really believe that. And it's weird because I guess to put a bow on it, I felt like they would stay in the series. I was hoping, obviously the first period was, and second period of last game was like an oh shit moment, but this team's never out of it. And I feel like they're constantly counted out. President's Trophy comeback at MetLife really set things up for this year. And I'm also happy Vinny Trocheck friggin' burned his former team. I mean, he had his handprints all over this series. So
beautiful, absolutely beautiful. He even said at the beginning of the series, he was like, "These teams change, man. Like, not a whole lot of guys on the other side that I played with." I was like, "Okay, all right, Vinny. Okay, I see you.
Okay,
I see you, Vinny."
Yeah, I think he has like 14 points in 10 playoff games. He had the double OT goal. Like, he's been a rock star for the Rangers, everything and more.
Dog.
Yep. All right. Well, Rangers on to the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll be back to preview once we have an opponent, once we have a schedule. Mike will have you back on for sure.
Yes. Let's go.
Oh
no, Steve. We lost him.
I guess I'll wrap things up.
Okay.
I guess I'll wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Like Steve-O said, conference final. Mike's on the pod. Love that. Carolina goes south. The storm flag is pulled down. Clear skies in New York. I love that. Mike showed me that, but I think BR put that up. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.